open economy behind us. And pictures of this. And look at a different extension of the New Keynesian model. Namely, one where we have a imperfection in financial markets. It's going to lead to the so-called accelerator. So we looked at sort of just a straightforward in the sense that we didn't have to change what we thought about the model. We just added in this other part, a completely exogenous, this foreign economy world. Right? We had to do a little bit more heavy lifting in terms of assembling these consumption baskets. And then we could think a little bit about monetary policy and exchange rates in terms of trade and the like. Now we're going to do something different. We're going to look at motivating, micro-founding, and then implementing the macro model, a new rigidity, a different rigidity. So we're going to look at first an overview of the model. Then I want to look at a micro-foundation for why net worth might play a role in borrowing, right? And what result that's going to give us. Right? When we implement this into a new Keynesian model. And we're also at the same time going to be adding in capital, working capital, economic capital into the new Keynesian model we didn't have before. Right? There's going to be a need to borrow. Firms are going to need to borrow. Right? They're going to borrow to finance something. And what they're going to be financing is investment in capital. Okay, and what we're going to see is that these credit frictions, we're going to amplify and propagate shocks beyond what we have in the baseline of the Keynesian model, the sticky price model. We observed about 17 years ago now how important this can be when we saw the amplification, propagation of shocks during the financial crisis. Right, so the empirical motivation here is that we find that credit spreads are countercyclical. What we mean by credit spreads is sort of how much more does a risky investment have to pay in terms of interest rate relative to a safe investment. And we see that during a recession, these spreads increase. I think that this makes perhaps intuitive sense, right? In a recession, banks are more reluctant to lend, and they're doubly more reluctant to lend to risky investors. So imagine we're in a recession. This means output is lower than it otherwise would be. And so now banks reduce their lending to risky projects, to investment projects by firms. This is going to reduce firms' investment. Investment is a component of demand, which has already gone down. Now it's going to go down even further because of banks' reluctance to lend. So now we have this amplification effect. These credit spreads, right, and the effect on lending and investment, right, is not going to be done exogenously. It's not like what we're going to do. So why are there higher credit spreads? How are they going to affect our investment? It's going to be based on balance sheets. So think of net worth. if you are if you have a high net worth, if you're an investor who's in a very stable financial position, your credit spread will be smaller. If your financial position is weaker, your credit spread is going to be larger. So now let's predict why these credit spreads are going to be countercyclical. As we go into a recession, demand falls, production falls. The value of your assets, the value of your collateral, your net worth are going to go down for everyone, right? That's what happens in a recession. Investors also lose out, right? They take losses in their portfolios. Well, what does this mean? This means if you're a borrower, if you're a firm or an entrepreneur and you're investing in projects, during recessions, your net worth falls, which means the credit spreads is the premium that you have to pay to invest is going to go up, right? Reducing your investment. This happens to all investors. Investment goes down, and we're amplifying, accelerating the effect of a recession. But it doesn't just stop there. This is then where we get the loop. So now, output has gone down. We've shown that this reduces our net worth, or we've intuitively thought about that. This is going to reduce our ability to invest because premiums are going to go up. So now, this reduces output even further. Well, the output is reduced even further, then our net worth is reduced even further. And we're stuck sort of here in a loop. This is going to really magnify this effect. So we've thought thus far about two types of frictions, monopolistic competition and sticky prices, and then two types of agents plus monetary policy, household firms and the central bank. Right, the only way that saving lending has taken place is in the form of riskless one-period bonds, right, or in the open economy, these sort of Air de Peru securities that reduce or that spread consumption risk evenly across countries. So we have smooth consumption across time and across countries. There's risk sharing. Right, but these securities, the savings, this lending, isn't productive in any way. In a sense, it's just a way for us to take our extra cookies and put them into a jar to eat tomorrow. So I made a mistake. I bought some cookies. I left the package. I didn't eat all of the cookies all at once. And I left it on the countertop. Yesterday, or the day before yesterday, and yesterday when I came back from class, I was like, yay, I'm done teaching you how to have some cookies. And there was a long trail of ants. The ants had found the cookies and were all over my face, like, oh no. Right, but we want to do more than just save cookies for tomorrow. Ants might come and get them. We want to think about now if this investment, savings, lendings is influential in the operation of the economy. Right, thus far this has been pretty much irrelevant. If we have frictionless financial markets, right, credit structure is irrelevant. Right? We saw this in our consumption savings model. Households chose the same amount of consumption regardless of the timing of their income. If they were a lender or a borrower, so long they just used credit markets to smooth this out. There was no other effect. It didn't really matter how this credit was structured. Modigliani-Miller theorem tells us that for a firm, it doesn't matter whether it finances investment through equity, right, or through debt. If we have perfect financial markets, these two things, arbitrage, are going to be evaluated the same values. The firm is going to be completely indifferent, and it's not going to affect the value of the firm. Right? Yet, as soon as we have some sort of imperfection in financial markets, right, we can break down the Modigliani-Miller theorem, we can break apart the equalization of consumption for savers and lenders that we saw in consumption savings model. So we're going to follow Bernanke, Geber, and Gilchrist. These two are very famous economists. Ben Bernanke is also a famous economist, right? And there's something really fantastic in hindsight how lucky we were in the U.S. economy, and because of the global connection, the global economy, that Ben Bernanke was the chairman of the Board of Governors of the Federal Reserve, the American Central Bank, during the financial crisis. Ben Bernanke had spent years beforehand studying how financial market imperfections influence the real economy and what monetary policy can do about it. Great guy to have in charge. And he's also done a lot in economic history, and spent a lot of time also studying the so-called lost decade surrounding the Great Depression, but also the developments in Japan in the 1990s. We saw Japan have a real estate market that collapsed, zombie banks, interest rates fall to zero overnight. So, and just a side note, Ben Bernanke, even though Donald Trump thinks that this topic isn't important, I think it is. Ben Bernanke was the last chairman of the Board of Governors of the Federal Reserve. After Ben Bernanke, we had Janet Yellen, who was in charge of the central bank in America, and the first woman in charge, and so this is the English language, right? We could have called Janet Yellen the chairwoman, right? Then we'd have chairwoman, chairman, and they decided, no, we're going to change it, and we're just going to make the person in charge of the Federal Reserve the chair. We'd say chairperson, but then we're economists, we're efficient, we change it. So now we just have the chair of the Federal Reserve. We've gotten rid of the term chairman or chair, right? It's no longer gender specific or anything like that. So it's a quality sort of perspective. So Ben Bernanke was the last chairman. Okay. He and co-authors in 1999 built a dynamic Keynesian model. This is, when the Keynesian model was just been born, right? And they were the first to lay out a very coherent foundation for bringing financial effects into this new Keynesian framework. And what they did is they built a financial accelerator into the model. So again, think about, we have a palpable pricing friction in our baseline New Keynesian model. We captured the essence of things that make firms decide not to want or not able to change their prices continuously by adding an exogenous process, this random selection of firms to change prices. So we have in the back of our minds some rigidities, some micro-founded rigidities. We've talked about menu costs. So maybe if you change your prices, you have to print new menus. That's expensive. Maybe if you want to change your price, you have to determine what that price is going to be. This is perhaps labor and time intensive to do a market study. Right? Or maybe the service-based industry, and you have these customer relations that are very important to maintain. And so with all of these micro-founded stories in the background, but to make the modeling simple, we then chose this random selection of firms. So what Bernanke, Geber, and Gilchrist is, they're going to give us a micro-foundation that we're going to look at, and then we're going to insert a financial accelerator. We're going to derive this relationship from a micro-foundation, but when we model it in the macro world, we're going to add an external, or we're going to add a relationship that connects external finance premium. So if I want to engage an investment project and I get my financing externally, so I borrow, then the premium above risk-free rates that I have to pay is going to move inversely with their net worth. That's this should seem straightforward. We're going to think about where this might come from, the micro-foundation. And so if Elon Musk and Alex Mayergoda both go to a bank and ask to borrow money for a project. We're going to invest in a new QR payment system, right? We're going to compete with the system that you guys are using, right? But we need to borrow we want to borrow money to finance this project. We want to finance it externally. Is the bank going to charge me more or Elon Musk more? Probably going to charge me more, right? You know, even though I might have a good reputation, it seems obvious when we do this comparison that, wow, we know that Elon Musk can pay for it. We might not agree with this policy or that policy. It's the same project, but his net worth is such that he will be able to borrow more cheaply than I will. That's fine on an individual level. The key then here is then the cyclical consequences that we just went through intuitively, right? On the macro level. If this holds for everybody, then when our collective net worth goes up or down, as the collective of investors, this is going to collectively increase the total cost or lower them, making them both our borrowing and then investment more cyclical than it had been before. The way this is going to work in the micro foundation is simply when our net worth falls, right? Say the risk of default goes up, the cost for a bank to monitor investments go up, right? Which means they're going to charge people more for their borrowing. So we end up borrowing less investment, less capital, and this is going to then reduce our net worth, and it's going to feed back into this. So we're going to look at modeling this in a micro foundation with default risk or monitoring costs. All right, so you're obvious in the real world, banks play an important role in the economy. Right? And the way banks work in the economy is as an intermediary. They're going to be the ones that are connecting our savings with investment projects. Right? There's sometimes we invest perhaps in individual projects, but most of the time people put their savings, money they have left over, in a bank. And the bank then takes over the investment decision. Right? Why? On the one hand, for us, we have this ability to withdraw our money anytime. Right? If I go to a GoFundMe project online, could be like a small individual investment that I do, and I give this person money, right, for a project that might take 2 years, and 6 months from now I need my money. What am I going to do? Right? I've given them the money, I promised them they could have the money for 2 years. How do I get the money back? Difficult. I have a claim through like maybe GoFundMe for profits that they might get when they first, I might be able to sell that to someone else. Where would you do that? Like, how would you find a buyer for that claim? Very, very difficult. So we tend to like to deposit our money in a bank, and the bank is going to invest in these longer term projects. Well, why? Because if all of us put our money in the bank, sure, it might be the case that I need my money back in 6 months, right? Or it might be you, or it might be you in 12 months, but it's very unlikely that all of us are going to need all of our money back all at the same time. Right? So kind of a law of large numbers approach. The bank can say, well, we're going to take everybody's money, we're going to keep some of it so we can give people back money when they need it, keep it in a liquid spot, but the rest of the money we can invest in illiquid, long-term projects that pay off. So these banks are in the middle. They're intermediaries. They're the ones that are connecting savers, depositors, with these investment projects. Another thing we can think of, monitoring, choosing good projects. Right? Right now, I'm here teaching you, which means I can't be evaluating different possible investment opportunities and how good are they, how good is their idea, how well funded is it, how right? A bank, hopefully there are people working in a bank that all they're doing is examining, assessing, evaluating, monitoring investment projects. Right? So we're going to have our banks take our deposits as households, and the banks are then going to engage in investing into investment opportunities, and they're going to be doing the due diligence, the monitoring, and that sort of thing. But we're going to have an imperfection. We have what's called an agency problem here. So the asymmetric information. So a bank, right, it's monitoring, is trying to figure things out, right? But it doesn't know exactly how good all these projects are. Right? That's the whole reason why I wanted the bank to do it in the first place, because it's better at that than I. I can't evaluate whose new app idea for the Apple Store or Play Store is better. I don't know. I mean, I kind of know something, but I'm really not, we need someone to monitor to figure out which of these projects is the better project, which of these people I'm lending my money to have maybe stolen money before, right? Or which have been engaged in lots of projects that were successful for, have paid back their money, right? I don't know this. It's the bank's job to figure that out. But a bank can never figure this out perfectly. Right? True creditworthiness is something that only perhaps the person taking the loan knows, right? But the bank doesn't know. It's costly to figure this out. What I told you, right now, people hopefully are at a bank working, trying to figure out which investment projects are good, which are not good. Right? They're trying to assess the creditworthiness or the riskiness of a particular project. Right? It's obviously costly. They're paying people to do that. So we have costs involved in monitoring an investment project. In the literature, if you look at the micro-literature, what we're going to do is we're going to call this costly state verification. And so you can think of some examples here. Why this is then costly? So if a bank says, we'll loan money, anyone who wants to borrow, we'll loan money to anyone who has a net worth of $1 million. Right? So if a bank says, we'll loan you money, we'll loan anybody here money at a good interest rate, $100,000 if you have a net worth of $1 million. All right. So I go to the bank and say, I have a net worth of $1 million. Give me $100,000. And the bank says, sure, here you go. We believe you. No, right? Anybody can say they have a net worth of $1 million. The bank is going to try to figure that out. They're going to have to monitor, to verify the state of my net worth. What are they going to want to do? They're going to see, I don't know, bank statements, or they, I have to make a bank statement. Has to be, Alex has 1 million. Right? Okay, no, it has to be better than that, right? It has to be an official bank statement, or maybe something that they can verify, like my account number, that they can then check with the bank. When you start to think about it, it's really to determine my creditworthiness for a project, the bank has to spend a significant amount of resources, right, to be a bad thing to be the solution. Right? To verify the state, it's going to be costly. So imagine also we're in a long-term project. So I've agreed, or I won the contract, and I'm building. I don't know. I'm going to build part of the high-speed rail from Ho Chi Minh to Hanoi. I won this contract, and the bank, lent me money to do this. and they want to see, well, am I doing a good job or not? So they call me up and say, Alex, how are things going? They're going great, fantastic. Oh, fantastic, super, goodbye. No, right? They're going to check, they're going to send people. How's the project, how is the construction going? Are you on time or not? Not just ask me, believe me, right? These monitoring costs, this is very important, right? And it's very costly. So this gives us a financial friction, and this is what determines, this is what causes this external finance premium. The reason why investors have to pay banks a higher rate when they borrow, right, than the banks pay to depositors. Right? There's a spread there, and the spread is what the banks use. Among other things, they also make profits in the real world and the like, but they also need this spread to pay these monitoring costs. They need to pay the people in the different departments that examine the investment opportunities, that check to see my bank account, my net worth, that examine, that monitor, that verify my progress on building the high-speed rail section that I have. Now this premium is going to depend inversely on our net worth. Right? So you can think of what's riskier. So an example, again, Elon Musk and Alex Meyer both go to a bank, and we want to borrow $100,000. The bank goes, $100,000, Alex Meyer goes, that's a lot of money. We got to be really careful here. Right? Elon Musk says he wants to borrow $100,000, and the bank says, here you go. Right? There's a difference there. I have to pay more. Right? They're going to have to engage. Why? They have to engage in more monitoring. It's not so clear what my credit worthiness is. Right? The magnitude of this loan, based on my net worth, right, puts me in a precarious financial situation. And so with a lower net worth, firms are more likely to default on the loan. Right? The bank is not sure whether I'll be able to pay them back these $100,000. That's why, right, it's going to charge me more, because it's going to have to spend more time making sure things are working out right. With Elon Musk, I mean, lots of things could happen, but I'm pretty sure Elon Musk could pay back $100,000. That's not going to be an issue. And this is going to give us this financial accelerator. We have the net worth of firms is going to evolve pro-cyclically. Why? Our net worth is the value of our liquid assets plus the collateral value of our illiquid assets, less than what we owe. So if the economy starts booming, the value of our assets is going to go up, which means our finance premium is going to go down, right? The bank has seen, wow, so the value of all my assets goes up. Now the bank is like, here, Alex Mariota, $100,000. Yeah? So I'm going to borrow more. There's going to be more credit lending by banks. So this is going to then increase our investment. Right, so what we see is, if you see like a standard recession, we're going to now have this recession amplified. When in a boom time, we're going to increase investment disproportionately more, because external finance premium are going to fall, and investors are going to borrow more, increase investment, increase output more. When we go to a recession, the recessions, you know, the flip side of the medallion, they're going to be even deeper, right? Investors are going to face higher external finance premium. This is going to increase their cost for borrowing. They're going to borrow less. There's going to be less investment, so output's going to go down by even more. Right? So excessive or insufficient supplies of capital as we go through this cycle. All right. right, so the way that they are going to put these agents into the model, we're going to have our banks or financial intermediaries. They're going to receive deposits from our households, and they're going to issue loans to a new group of people who we have in our model. So we have a new group financial intermediaries, and we're now going to have a group of people called entrepreneurs, finance investment. So instead of the representative firm that we had before, we're now going to have two types of firms. We're going to have our entrepreneurs who are going to be producing a homogeneous intermediate good under perfect competition. And they're going to demand labor and credit or capital. And some of this capital they're going to have to finance through credit. And they're also going to work for their own production. And then we're going to have retailers who take this intermediate good and turn it into our differentiated final goods that are then sold under our standard New Keynesian monopolist competition sticky prices. So we have an input. So imagine we have our clothing producers who are producing all the shirts of all the different colors. They all need to have this cloth that has to be woven to come into this production. And we're going to have different entrepreneurs that have, I've got a better cloth weaving factory than you. I can do this cheaper, I can do this better, but I need to borrow. I need to borrow money to get the capital for the machines, right? To produce the cloth. Right? In the end, right, all the cloth is the same. Right? So we're not going to differentiate between that and the modeling technique, and the retailers are just going to put a different color under the cloth to differentiate the final goods. The reason why this is done, right, you think, wait a second, a lot of these clothes, this is all one production process, the making of the cloth and the dyeing of the cloth. We're going to separate them so that we can directly see the difference between the financial frictions and the nominal frictions. Right? If we put them together into one firm that's doing all of this, then these effects will be difficult to disentangle from each other. Right, so we can kind of see what's going to happen here. We're going to take some small shocks. We're going to be amplifying things through this financial accelerator here. Right, so for example, you can have a small change in the real interest rate induced by monetary policy, or a small change in marginal costs, say like oil shock, can then end up having very large effects. We have this feedback, this through the net worth external premium channel. Right? We're also going to then do a better job of matching this credit extension throughout the business cycle. Right? And we're going to match the different interest rates. We're going to have different interest rates for risky and safe assets. Right? And there's also then which of course we observe it in the data as well. We also have a large empirical evidence for credit constraints, borrowing, and how these are related econometrically to consumption and investment. All right, so we're going to have entrepreneurs and financial intermediaries. Otherwise, we're going to have our standard Keynesian environment. We also have capital, so think back to another macro model, maybe like the Scylla model. We have capital. We'll see as we get to it. This core friction is going to be costly state verification. Right? How good is this entrepreneur? Right? We have maybe the better example would be think of Android phones. So let's forget about the really big ones, like Apple's always an Android or like Samsung, but let's pretend there were lots of these otherwise identical. I mean, an Android phone is an Android phone, unless it's really special. Sony phone is great, I guess. Samsung phone is great, Google phones, but it's all Android, it's all the same, right? These are the final goods products. And what we have is in our former Minh Duong province here, a lot of transistor manufacturers. All these phones need transistors, and we have a lot of independent transistor factories, all producing the same transistor that they're selling to these cell phone manufacturers. Right? Some of these transistor factories are better than others. Some of them are more efficient than others. Right? Banks are going to be fine. Transistor business is great. Right? Vietnam is booming, but not all of them are equally efficient. Not all of them are equally good. Right? If you were to the transistors factories, we're going to have to find people on the streets to finance them. This wouldn't work. They're going to approach a bank, and so the bank is going to take over the job of taking our deposits and then monitoring, determining, figuring out how to finance all of these many different independent transistor factories around here. We'll find from the macro model the sufficient statistic for how this micro-founded friction works is to link the spread of the expected return on risky capital over riskless rate on bonds to leverage the net worth of firms. Right. This is then also going to link then our internal funds for net worth to this external finance group. All right, so our three types of agents alongside the government, our households are going to be the same as before. Now our savings goes into deposits at the bank. All right, instead of buying these riskless bonds, right, we're going to put our money in the bank. I mean, if you have money left over, like how many people here own a government bond, right? How many people have money in a bank account somewhere? Probably have, right? Okay, this is probably a little bit more, actually more straightforward than what we had before. And our bank is going to do, and your bank does something like that. We're going to have entrepreneurs. These are going to be risk-neutral business people that are demanding capital and labor to produce these intermediate goods. Some of this capital they can finance themselves. The rest they're going to have to borrow. What makes this risky is going to be, say, the probability of bankruptcy. There's going to be a probability of these entrepreneurs going bankrupt. And this probability is going to make this risky, so banks are going to try to monitor the state of the entrepreneur, and they're going to have to charge a finance premium to recover this, and it's going to be related inversely to net worth. And then we have our retailers are our standard New Keynesian firms. All right, so again, here we see it sort of in two columns. The idea here is to split our firms into this intermediary sector that has to deal with financing, and then have our retailers do the standard part. So we can separate cleanly then the effect of these financial frictions without it being intertwined with the New Keynesian sticky price friction. All right, so monitoring costs and the role of net worth. So we're going to have our entrepreneurs that have an idiosyncratic return on capital. Right? So some transistor factories do a better job than others. Right? Some cloth manufacturers generate a higher return than others. It's idiosyncratic. So This is going to be the key driver that's going to give us this our differentiation between different entrepreneurs, which is how we're going to get an entrepreneur risk for banks. And the idea is, well, if you have a high net worth, right, low leverage, then the probability of you defaulting, right, is going to be lower. So even if your return is maybe a little bit lower than as long as you have a high net worth, you're unlikely to go bankrupt. Right, so the premium is going to be rising in your leverage. Right, it's just going to be falling in the amount of your financing of capital. So this is the amount of capital that you have. This is the price of capital, and this is the share that you're financing here. That's your net worth. So if 90% of your capital is financed internally, right, you have a very low leverage ratio. If only 10% of your capital is financed internally, then you have a very high leverage ratio. You have to pay a higher premium. All right, so we're going to have an entrepreneur in charge of firm J. This entrepreneur purchases capital that it's going to use in the next period's production. So we're buying the factory today, we're buying the machines today that we're going to be using tomorrow. Okay. The price of a unit of capital, right, so how much does it cost us to buy the factory today or to buy a new machine today, is going to be QT. We're going to take that as given for the moment. The entrepreneur is trying to determine how much capital to buy. This is going to be the market clearing equilibrium price. All right, now after the fact, next period, our firm, our entrepreneur J, is going to generate the return omega J times our T plus 1K. So our T plus 1K is going to be our average return of the risky capital projects. And our return might be higher, if omega is greater than 1, or it might be lower, if it's less than 1, than this average return. Right? So we're going to have the really good, successful, efficient transistor factory managers, and the less efficient, less successful managers. All right, so this omega is going to be, right, it's different for each J, so it's idiosyncratic, and it's going to be stochastic. The individual risk. Now at the end of period T, going to the next period, our entrepreneur J has a net worth of NJ T plus 1. So now we need to figure out, and it's just writing out our balance sheet, our budget, how much of our capital purchases, QT, KJ T plus 1, we're going to finance with our net worth. Whatever's left over, right, if we can't finance all of our capital purchases with our net worth, then we're going to have to borrow the rest. Right, so this identity just gives us how much we're borrowing. Right, I'm buying a factory for $80 million, and I have $60 million net worth. That means I've borrowed $20 million to finance the factory. Right, it's just an identity. So where's this borrowing going to come from? It's going to come from a financial intermediary, think of a bank, that collects loans from households and extends these loans to entrepreneurs. It faces an opportunity cost. Right? You can think of the bank. The bank pays households this riskless gross return RT plus 1. Or the bank could take these funds from the household and invest in riskless bonds from the government at RT plus 1. There we have an arbitrage right? These are both riskless, we're assuming, the returns are going to be the same. Right, and this is going to be the return that's controlled by, the interest rate controlled by the central bank. Right, we're going to think these financial intermediaries are perfectly diversified. There's no risk. It's also important with this model sort of it captures the risk of the investment, but it doesn't capture risk inside the financial intermediary. Right? Financial intermediaries, we've continued to find frequently have portfolios with substantial risk. Yeah? Our entrepreneurs are going to be risk neutral. Our households are risk averse. Right, so you can think this is maybe then both are going to supply labor. So these entrepreneurs are people. These are actual people that are working in our economy. So perhaps you can imagine like we have there are two types of people, and there are people in every economy where you see these entrepreneur types, someone like an Elon Musk, right? Huge risks. If you look at the story of what he did with the SpaceX and the rockets exploding at first, I wouldn't be in his business for a number of reasons. One of which is certainly that I am not as risk neutral as he is. I'm certainly more risk averse. Yeah? All right. So this means because of the risk neutrality, vis-a-vis the household's risk aversion, entrepreneurs, they're going to have to absorb any aggregate risk of lending. The household would not be interested in investing in something that has a slightly higher return, but a lot more risk. Right? Remember, we have our concave utility function picture that I drew last week. This means that any risk beyond the idiosyncratic risk, right? So the total risk of this entrepreneurial activity has to be borne by the entrepreneurs as a whole. This is what's going to be the higher rate that they have to be charged. We have to compensate the people giving us money for the risks that we're generating. So this costly state verification problem goes back quite a ways in Townsend, and the way we're setting up here, we have that our entrepreneurs, right, we're purchasing this amount of capital, KTJ, to produce next period. We have to pay the price QT today, and the return that we generate is the market average, or the average entrepreneurial return, times our idiosyncratic factor. We know that. Right? I know, right, how hardworking I was yesterday or how lazy I was yesterday. I know the bank doesn't know that, right? But I know. Yeah? The bank is going to have to pay a cost to monitor us, to figure out, to see how hard I was working. Right? The bank has to send someone to my factory and see whether I was lying in a hammock or doing my job. An easier way to build this into the model is instead, let's think of this then as bankruptcy costs. If I go bankrupt, the bank is going to collect whatever's left over, but they're not going to get to keep all that was left over. Some of it gets lost. Some of it has to go to paying, like figuring out the auditing, the accounting, like the factory's gone broken or has gone bankrupt. The bank comes in and says, okay, I guess we own this factory now. What do we have here? We have to figure out now what was actually produced, how valuable these machines are after they've been worked on for a while. Right, then we have to collect them, we have to sell them. Right? I don't know, have you ever sold a transistor factory before? No. Wow. It probably takes some losses. So we're just going to put this the state verification, the cost for the bank of being involved in this process, as a fraction of this realized payout. So if a factory J goes bankrupt, then the bank doesn't get to keep what the factory actually produced, but only a fraction. A fraction of it is going to get lost. A fraction is going to go to this monitoring cost of bankruptcy costs. Let's here drop the J's for a second. It should be J's on the outside and inside here. So our ex post payoff is going to be this term here. The bank has to pay a fraction of the realized payoff to verify the outcome. So we can think of two options here. So I'm a factory owner. So we've determined my borrowing. This is the amount of capital investment less my net worth that I'm going to do. And I've agreed, I'm calling it introducing here, and the amount that I've agreed to pay back the bank, so the terms of my loan, is ZT plus 1. The bank doesn't care how hard I was working. The bank doesn't care whether I was sleeping in the hammock or not. As long as I'm able to pay them back, ZT plus 1, BT plus 1. That's all the bank cares about, right? So if I pay the bank back what I owe them, right, the bank doesn't have to do any monitoring. The bank doesn't have to figure out what to do with my factory, what they have, what they can sell. The bank is happy. The bank gets back what we had contractually. So if we could do this, if we didn't have an information cost, and imagine now, if we didn't have this cost of state verification, if we didn't have this asymmetric information, the bank could charge me a ZJ such that the bank could capture all of my returns. Right? We could think of a bank would know, you worked really hard, fantastic, give me more money. You didn't work real hard, then I get less. Right? But a bank has to set this, we have to agree upon this payout rate, we have to pay back this ZT plus 1 beforehand, and without the bank being able to make it conditional on my actual omega, unless here the bank pays this monitoring cost. So we can come up with an optimal contract defined as follows. So there's going to be some threshold omega above which we don't default as entrepreneurs, above which we pay back the bank the agreed upon payout, and then some realization of omega. And below that, we will then choose to default. All right, so let's think about the case of when our total payout, so our capital J and our omega J, is greater than what we agreed to pay back to the bank. Fantastic, right? This is why I'm an entrepreneur. I've made a profit. I've generated with my transistor factory this much of return, and I only have to pay the bank back that much. Right? So why would I choose to default? Well, I won't, right? I'm going to take that profit home. What if my return, idiosyncratic return, is less than what I paid out to the bank, or promised to pay to the bank? Well, obviously, then I have to default. I can't pay the bank back what I promised. So this threshold, the all-important threshold omega, is going to be that omega such that what I generate on returns just exactly covers what I promised to pay back the bank. I just broke even. And now we can think about if we increase or if we decrease our net worth. So if we increase the amount of borrowing that we have to do, holding our capital purchases constant, holding the market or the average entrepreneur return rate and our idiosyncratic components constant, right? If we increase the amount of borrowing that we have to do, because we lower our net rate, our net worth, well, if this goes up, then this threshold, right, is going to go up. I'm going to have a higher idiosyncratic productivity in order to cover, right, to make up for the fact that I have a lower net worth. Right, so we're going to have a larger mass of our idiosyncratic omegas that are associated with default. Higher default probability. This also has a consequence for the bank. The larger the proportion of entrepreneurs is that go bankrupt, these are more factories that the bank has to sell. Right? More factories that it then has to examine and see what was actually done, what it's worth, and what it can get out of it. So we're going to demand a higher premium. So we think that banks, when they choose, we group on the ZT, they're going to choose a higher ZT to cover this increased cost of monitoring. All right, so if we don't have any aggregate risk, let's say that this R T plus 1, so the average return of entrepreneurs is known in advance. So the only thing that's going to be unknown in advance is this idiosyncratic return of entrepreneurs. Right, so we choose how much capital, and hence to purchase, and hence how much we're going to borrow, given our net worth, before we know how productive we are. Right? I'm going to become a transistor maker. I'm going to buy a factory tomorrow. I'm going to work so hard. Tomorrow I'll wake up and, oh, my back hurts. You know? My omega's lower. You know? We don't know this in advance. So beforehand, we're going to engage in this financial loan, this financial contract. And what we're going to determine, what we're going to agree upon, is this loan rate Z that we pay back if we don't default. And then this is going to determine, through this equation, a threshold value omega, such that if our realized omega is above this one, then we will repay the loan. And if it's less than this one, we're going to default on the loan. Right? Our equation 2 is then this defines that threshold. Right, so if our realized omega is above this threshold, then the financial intermediary gets the promised loan payment, and the entrepreneur keeps the difference. This is its profit. Right? This is what it produced. This is what it had to pay back. If omega G is less than the threshold value, then our entrepreneur defaults on the loan. Right? We call the bank, sorry, I can't pay back the ZB. You can have your factory. bank has to pay the monitoring costs, has to come out and examine the factory, go through the bankruptcy proceedings, figure out how to sell it, and after it's done all that, so it doesn't get back what the factory actually is worth, what's actually produced after the year, it gets only a fraction of that, what's left after the monitoring costs. And the entrepreneur receives nothing. So now the bank is going to figure out when is it going to be an arbitrage argument. On one hand, it could take the funds that entrepreneurs want to borrow from it, and they can invest it back onto the bond market, risk-free bonds for the government. That's the outside option return. What's its return in total if it takes this massive funds and invests it into all the different transistor producers here in former Binh Duong province? Well, the mass of firms whose omega is above the threshold pay back the agreed upon amount to the bank. So that's the amount that they borrowed times the quantities. We can think of this in terms of the expected value of loaning to any firm or entrepreneur J is the probability that it's not going to default. Right? The probability that it's not going to default is simply the mass of the probability distribution that's above the threshold. Right? So the CDF, the whole CDF is equal to 1 over the support. Right? Probability sum to 1. And we're going to subtract the mass and the probability of the CDF over the support up to omega j. Right? And there's also the probability or the possibility that this entrepreneur will go bankrupt. Right? If the entrepreneur goes bankrupt, then we get whatever the entrepreneur bought in capital, what it produced within capital in the market, and its own idiosyncratic adjustment. And this has an expected value of the expected value of this omega, but not over the expected value of omega over the whole support of the distribution. The expected value of omega conditional on omega being less than the threshold. Right? So we have a truncation here. So omega, the lowest omega can be a 0. That's someone who produces absolutely nothing at all. This is the factory worker who bought it, or the factory owner who bought a factory but then never showed up for work. Right? Think of the cumulative density function. calculate the average value of omega, which is PDF, might be, this is our average omega. But now, here we're calculating something a little bit different. We have maybe bad case of the economy. Maybe we have this threshold on omega. So all the firms to the right here, they make a profit and they're happy, and all of these ones go bankrupt. And this is our cutoff. What does this mean? Well, if we calculate the average conditional on omega being less than omega bar, it's certainly going to be lower, because all the really high omegas are not in this calculation. All these really high omegas pay back their loans. All right, so this is the average omega conditional on omega less than omega bar. Right, so certainly you see as we move this threshold further to the left, this is going to shift the average omega conditional on being smaller than that also further to the left. So this makes something a very special type of risk that the bank is engaging in. It's only on one side of the risk that the bank is participating. The bank doesn't get any of the really good payouts. You know? There's a positive risk, right? That an entrepreneur is very successful. In that case, the bank gets ZB. If the bank is just a little bit successful, the bank gets ZB. Right? The bank always gets ZB so long as the firm is successful. It doesn't participate at all in that upside risk, but it does participate in the downside risk. This is a without there being some compensation for the bank, this is a bad investment. Right, so, you know, okay, I'm going to go to Macau and I'm going to gamble. Could you give me $100? If I win in Macau, I'll give you the $100 back. And if I lose, then I mean tough luck for you. Excuse me? Who wants to loan me $100 to do that? Right? Nobody. Right? This is like a bad. How is the bank going to deal with this? Well, it's going to choose the Z. No, wait a second. You're going to go to Macau and gamble? Okay. I want you to pay back I'm going to loan you $100. You're going to pay me back $200. Right? Okay, so if I don't make $200, I can't pay you back. Right? Bummers, but if I am successful, you're going to get more than the $100 back. You're going to make a profit. Right? We're going to set this Z, the bank, in such a way, right, that it can be compensated for this downside risk. But we know from before, setting this Z also affects this threshold. So to think about the way this works, for a second, let's forget about the monitoring costs. So there's no monitoring costs, and it's just me going to Macau. So I'm going to borrow $100. If I win, right? I'll pay you your $100 back. If I lose money, I'm going to give you whatever I have left over. So if I end up with $50, you get $50, $40, you get $40, $100, you get $100. If I make $200, you get $100. If I make $1 million, you still only get $100. Right? See this truncation. Now, let's say we set this z to 200. Now, on the one hand, so for this, what's happened between this 100 and 200 now, any profits that I make between that are more than 100 and less than 200, you get to keep entirely as the bank. You've now gotten all of those payouts. It's just cut off at 200. An ideal way, right? How could I participate in both? Right? I still have all the downside risk, but now I've captured a little bit more of this upside risk. If I set z up to infinity dollars, then sure, here's $100. Go gamble in Macau. I get to keep whatever you make. So on the one hand, our bank might like to increase this z. Of course, then for me as the entrepreneur, right, there's no reason for me to take this gamble. There's nothing left for me. When we add in the monitoring cost, right, then right, this payout is then reduced. So what we see here, so long story short, when we increase z, on the one hand, we increase our participation in the upside risk as the bank. We also, however, increase the likelihood that an entrepreneur is going to go broke, is going to go bankrupt. You have to pay me more. That means you have to be more successful. And if I go from 100 to 200 to 300, you have to be more successful in Macau in order to make above this threshold to make a profit. So it's going to make it more likely that the entrepreneur is going to go broke. So we have this trade-off. On the one hand, we'd like to raise ZT. This increases our payoff. This increases our participation in the upside risk. On the other hand, it increases the probability that our entrepreneur is going to go bankrupt, and we lose a portion of the payouts then as well. So this is what's going to give us then an internal solution. We have these two countervailing effects. All right, if we use here now this threshold condition here, another way is, well, wait a second. This determines ZT. As soon as we figured out the threshold, right, if we fix the threshold, then we determine what this Z needs to be. And so we plug that condition here into 3. Where our net worth comes from as related to the borrowing. Let's first focus on the left-hand side. What this is telling us here, if we increase the threshold, we're going to increase the amount of people who go bankrupt. We're going to reduce the amount of entrepreneurs who are successful. But by increasing this threshold, we're also increasing here this payout that we get if they are successful. Right? So it's the same logic that's with these two different effects. And so we combine this here, we get then the term we have in square brackets here. This here is the average of mu conditional, or omega conditional omega being less than omega bar. That's this red dotted line here. So what we're doing, if you want to try and then calculate in our, if we forget about this 1 minus mu for a second, what we then have here, we have a PDF of returns to banks. We essentially have something disjointed spike. What we're doing is we're taking all of this mass here and concentrating it into a point mass. So if you were to forget the omega here, what we would have here is exactly that picture. Right? So drop the omega and have omega, or drop the mu, and have omega to infinity. Then we just have the expected value of omega. Now we're going to put in a threshold, and the threshold, when we calculate the average, tells us that we're going to calculate the average of omega using the PDF up to the threshold. And at the threshold, we're going to calculate the average using that threshold value for the entire mass of probability beyond the threshold. So now we get we're going to get this unique interior value because we have a trade-off. If there's going to be some optimal threshold, and if omega is above this optimal threshold, right, so if we're demanding too much of our entrepreneurs going to Macau, right, we've increased the probability of default too much. Right? If omega is below the optimal value, right, then we increase probability of default. This decreases our expected return, so we want to reduce omega. We have credit ration. If omega is below this optimal value, then we're just reducing the expected payoff. Right. And now, at the same time, you can also see on the right-hand side, there's the inroad for our entrepreneurs. We determine omega, this threshold here. Now, we can start to figure out how much credit we want to demand. Right? This is on two different sides of the equation with the same sign, so there's a positive and negative effect of the size of credit relative to our own funds, right? So our leverage. And what happens if this return of entrepreneurial activity in general isn't constant or deterministic? What if we have business cycle fluctuations? Well, what this is going to mean is that the ex post realization of this average return across entrepreneurs is also going to depend on this threshold. So optimality condition still holds, right? But what we see, right, is going to hold for each value of RTK. So if RTK turns out to be lower than expected, lower than its average value, then we see that both Z and omega R are going to have to go up. So this lower payoff in the default state is going to be compensated by this higher loan payment in the non-default state. So go back here for the bank. If this R goes down, then the bank is going to want to be compensated by demanding a higher Z, so a higher payout for those entrepreneurs who don't go broke. And we know then that a higher Z, right, R has gone down, higher Z has gone up, right, so this means this omega is going to have to certainly go up. Okay, so in deteriorating macroeconomic conditions, right, if average returns turn out to be lower than their average values, so below average economic returns, then default probability, omega, goes up, and the rates on risky loans, on average, right, Z is going to go up as well. All right. We'll figure out now how entrepreneurs deal with these trade-offs after lunch, okay? So I'll see you in about an hour.